everybody, welcome to Roll and Move Reviews, and thanks for tuning into this latest edition of the Top 10 Top 10s of Board Gaming. Today we're going to talk about our number 7 list, the Top 10 Game Publishers. Now there are hundreds of board game publishers out there, all vying for your board game dollar and trying to carve out their own little niche in the industry. The ones who are the most successful at that are the ones that eventually put an idea of what their games are in your head so that you have a preconceived notion, hopefully a good one, when you see their games on the shelf or hear their games announced. And you want to buy that because you know it's going to be a good game. You're going to enjoy it based on what that company has done before. When I first came up with the idea for this list, I wasn't too excited about it because I didn't know how interesting it would be to just talk about different game companies. But as I started to do research and looking into the different publishers, I really got excited to talk about what they do differently and what they do well. One thing to keep in mind before we proceed, though, is the fact that I just don't pay too close attention to the business side of board gaming. I understand that there are constantly mergers and acquisitions, and companies are being dismantled and absorbed by other companies, and things are always changing. Also, I realize that the rights to board games are fluid, and the idea that a company who published a game yesterday may not be the same company that's publishing it today. To keep it simple, I basically just went by the names of the company on the version of the box that I'm playing. So if I say the name of a company, you're like, oh, that company doesn't really exist anymore because it's a part of this company, it's good enough for me. The name's on the box that counts. So without further ado, let's take a look at the top 10 board game publishers. The number 10 company on my list is Alderac Entertainment Group, otherwise known as AEG. And personally, I had to put them on the list just because they're responsible for Smash Up, one of my favorite little card games. Very fun, very accessible. I've done a review on this. Love this game. Play with anybody, tons of replayability. So they deserve, if for nothing else, just to be on the list for this. But beyond that, Alderac is responsible for bringing this little game over to America. That's Love Letter, as well as all the successive versions, such as Batman and everything else they've put out. But with all the different versions of Love Letter, starting with those anyway, AEG is very much at the forefront, I think, of the mini-game craze that's going on right now. And I think that's a very big deal, and it's very important because we're at a time period now where you know you don't have to go out and spend $60, $70, $80 to get a game you're going to have fun with and enjoy. If you're on a budget, you only got 10, 15 bucks in your pocket, you can go out and you can buy a game like Love Letter or one of the many other mini-games AEG puts out, and you know you're going to get a game that you and your friends are going to enjoy, you're going to have fun with, and you can play over and over. You're going to get a lot of use out of, a lot of replayability. So I think that's a very important thing AEG's done, not only for just quality games, but also for people who are gaming on a budget, which is, you know, very important right now, the way things are. A lot of people don't have as much money to spend as they might have in the past. So little games like this are very helpful to get people through that, scratch that gaming itch without having to break the bank. So AEG, number 10. The number 9 game on my list, appropriately enough, is Gale Force 9. GF9 is a smaller company, relatively new. They haven't put out a lot of games yet. But I talked earlier about companies carving out their own niche, and that is something Gale Force 9 has done exceedingly well. In years past, if you heard about a game coming out based on a licensed property, especially TV shows, you could be pretty confident that game was going to be garbage. Now, Gale Force 9 single-handedly is really changing a lot of that expectation. They made their first big splash with Spartacus a couple years ago, based on the Showtime series. And who would have thought that a game based on a cheesy, adult-themed Showtime series would be any good? But it turned out to be a really solid game. They followed that up with Firefly, and there had to be a tremendous amount of pressure there because Firefly is such a beloved property, and I'm sure a lot of board gamers are also browncoats. And I know personally, when I first got into board gaming, I looked around, I was like, okay, where's the Firefly game? They finally put that game out, and it lived up to expectations. It really captured Firefly well, and it was a good game. Followed that up with another game based on a series I love, Sons of Anarchy, and they did this game very well. Very fun game. Again, captured the theme great. And the biggest compliment I can give Gale Force 9 is that while you don't have to know the property the game is based on to enjoy the game, knowing the property, at least for a little while before everybody else catches up, is going to make you better at it. Knowing the themes and the personalities and the characters in the game, knowing how the world works in the program is going to give you an advantage in the game because it translates so well from show to game, the world that's created. I haven't played Homeland yet, and I hear that one's kind of a miss, but GF9 does have a Star Trek 4X game coming out in 2016 that I'm very excited about, and I think they're going to right the ship. And I'm just very excited to see what this company puts out in the years to come. So that is number 9 on my list, Gale Force 9. The number 8 company on my list is Greater Than Games. They hit the scene a few years ago with this wonderful little superhero card game experience called Sentinels of the Multiverse. Since then, they put out another Sentinels game called Tactics and a outer space themed game called Galactic Strike Force. Last year, they merged with Dice Hate Me Games, and I think there's going to be a lot of really cool games that come out of that merger as well. There just seems to be a lot of heart and passion behind everything they do. I love what they've done with Sentinels of the Multiverse and the world building and the universe building they're doing there. I don't think the 2 games they have out now are going to be it. I think they're going to put out a lot more in that world. They seem to have a lot of big plans for it, and I'm really excited to see what they do. But despite the great games that Greater Than puts out, they are also responsible for one of my favorite innovations in board game retail over the past 5 years. What they did with Sentinels Tactics and Galactic Strike Force is they included cardboard miniatures in the game and made plastic miniatures available to be sold separately. Again, going back to the idea of board gaming on a budget, that they gave the consumer the choice of how much you want to spend on this game and how badly do you want it pimped out with all the bells and whistles. And instead of making it nothing at all, where you either spend 60 or 70 bucks on this game, or you get nothing, you can take the scaled down version and still enjoy the game, or you can upgrade and get everything. It's your choice. I wish more companies would follow suit, and I really think the Greater Than Games needs to be commended for coming up with that idea. Beyond that, a great company. I think they have a great future. I'm really excited to see what these guys do in the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years. I think they got nowhere to go but up, and I think they're going to be putting out a lot of great product for years to come. My number 7 top game publisher is Yellow. I think that's how I pronounce it, and that's what we'll go with. And they're best known at this point for publishing King of Tokyo, this fun little family weight dice rolling kaiju game. But they have a lot of other fun games as well. They did Dungeon Fighter, Steam Park, Heroes of Normandy. So a wide variety of games. They did their Tales and Games storybook series, which I haven't played but looks like a lot of fun. And that's the cool thing about Yellow. Their games look fantastic. Every year I go to Origins, and one of the first stops I'm going to make is at the Yellow booth. And I'm going to try and demo some games, but even if I don't, I just like to look around, look at the games on the shelves, look at games on the table being demoed, watch other people playing, because the games look so good and they look so fun, and you want to be a part of that. The games don't just look great, they are a lot of fun. They put out a lot of great games, a lot of family weight stuff. And this is another company I think is definitely on the rise and could be very higher on this list in the future. That's Yellow, number 7. My number 6 board game publishing company is Z-Man Games. Now, Z-Man's not a company you hear a lot of buzz about. You don't see people get excited about, oh, the next big Z-Man project to come across the pike. But they consistently publish a lot of great games, and they have a ton of awesome games out there. They currently own 2 gigantic franchises, Carcassonne and Pandemic. Now, Carcassonne may be everybody's favorite Euro-style gateway game. Pandemic may be everybody's favorite co-op game. Just 2 huge games in the board gaming industry, and again, very popular. And now Pandemic Legacy just came out. It's been out about a month, and it's taking over the world. As of this recording, it's the number 3 top game on Board Game Geek. Number 3 top game of all time, ever. Z-Man is just putting out these really fantastic games that people love. Besides that, they have Terra Mystica. Speaking of Board Game Geek, that's number 2. They have Agricola, which is number 7. They have 3 out of the top 10 board games on Board Game Geek. So a lot of very popular, consistently well-loved games. They also currently publish Stone Age, Merchants and Marauders, El Grande, Le Havre. Huge games, huge titles in board gaming that you don't think about what company publishes them. You probably don't even know because they got the rights from other places. But right now, it's Z-Man Games putting all those out. Again, not a huge company in the terms of buzz or excitement or people talking about it. A company with a great catalog, lots of great games, and that provides consistent gaming experiences that are very enjoyable and a lot of fun. So that's why number 6, Z-Man Games. Number 5 game company on my list is Rio Grande Games. Rio Grande got its start publishing Euro games in English and bringing them over to America. Eventually branched out and started publishing their own games, but they're most well known for the games that they ported over to the US. There are a lot of games they're no longer publishing, but they are initially responsible for bringing here, and they're games we all know and love that are very popular. Games like Le Havre, El Grande, Stone Age, Carcassonne. Those were all initial Rio Grande properties in the States. And of course, they still have a lot of great games they are publishing. Games like Puerto Rico, which is a perennial favorite. Dominion, one of the biggest games in the past 10 years that still has a huge following. And little games like this, Tobago, This was one they brought over. It's a very underrated game that I really enjoy. But like I said, games they both publish and have brought to the States from other countries. Huge catalog of games from them. I was researching Rio Grande. I didn't realize how big their catalog was. They have so many games. And the thing I noticed about them is there are a lot of games out there, and if you're like me, you've seen games, you've heard of games other reviewers talk about, other gamers talk about, and they're games you're like, wow, I'd really like to try that someday. I've never seen it, I've never played it, but it looks and sounds like a game I'd really like to try. Maybe it's out of print, and when it comes back, you want to try and get your hands on it. For my list, I found out, wasn't aware of it, most of those games are Rio Grande games. They just have a deep selection of games that are just look really fun and that I'd really like to check out and play. Just very consistent in their production of their games. And there's just so many of them. Again, another company just keeps chugging along. You don't hear a lot about them on the hotness, and you hear too much buzz about them, but they're putting out consistently great games. That's number 5, Rio Grande. Coming in at number 4 of the best game publishers is Days of Wonder. Now, I talked previously about the great graphic design you get with the Yellow and the great game experience you get with Z-Man games. I think if you combine the two of those things, what you're going to get is a Days of Wonder game. Days of Wonder consistently puts out product that is visually stunning and gives you a fantastic game experience. These are the guys that do Memoir 44. They do Small World. Ticket to Ride, which I'm not as big a fan of as everybody else is, but I can't deny the impact and the legacy of that game. They do Shadows over Camelot. More recently, they did Five Tribes and Splendor, two of the biggest games, most talked about games in the past couple years, was put out by Days of Wonder. I love Days of Wonder games. I love taking them down off the shelf. They look fantastic. They're fun to look at. And you open them up, you know you're not going to be disappointed because everything inside the game, everything about the game is going to be as good as the game looks. So Days of Wonder, a great game, tons of great things to play, great product consistently coming out, and that's why they're my number 4. The number 3 company on my list is Plaid Hat Games. This is a company that just does not seem to miss. They just keep putting out hit after hit after hit. They came onto the scene a while back with Summoner Wars, awesome tactical game that a lot of people loved, and since then they've continued to expand that game, put out new sets, different variations, and the game just keeps getting better and better. After that, they put out Mice and Mystics, which is another really great game. Really cool take on the dungeon crawl. After that, they topped themselves again with Dead of Winter. 2015, who among us didn't sit around waiting for their copy of Dead of Winter? This is the one everybody was waiting for. Everybody wanted to play. Once we got it in our hands, we loved it. Everybody wanted to play Dead of Winter, and it was a great game. Recently, they put out Tailfeathers, which I haven't played yet, but looks really cool. It's another game in that Mice and Mystics universe, and I'm just really excited. My anticipation is really high because I know Plaid Hat just puts out great, consistent material. A lot of people might be saying, well, number 3 is pretty high for a company that's only put out a couple games. And you're right, there are companies with a much larger body of work that I put behind Plaid Hat Games. But I think it's Plaid Hat's momentum that has shot them to the top of this list, to number 3 on this list, because they just have so many great games now. And I'm excited to see what they're going to do next. And the way things are going, I don't see how in a few years they're not going to be number 1 on this list. The number 2 game company on my list is one that's going to be very divisive because they're a publisher whose games you either love or hate. There's usually not a whole lot in between. And that company is Flying Frog Productions. Now, I agonized over to put Flying Frog on my list because ever since I played their first game, Last Night on Earth, as well as their second game, A Touch of Evil, they have been my favorite game company. I just love everything about them. I love their artwork. I know it's cheesy. It's supposed to be cheesy. Everybody stop taking it so seriously. I love the components and the mechanics and how there's a lot of crossover there. I always called them the Pixar of board games because they didn't put out a ton of product. There wasn't, they weren't churning out. There's maybe only one a year, maybe even less than that. But what they put out was always a labor of love, and you could see their stamp on it. You knew it was one of their games. They put CDs, they put soundtracks to every one of their games, which is just so unique and so original, and no one else is doing that. And I love all the creative things they did that made Flying Frog games different and special. But my favorite thing about Flying Frog is the fact that they always promised that none of their games would ever die. Nothing would ever be retired. There was always another expansion for every one of their games on the horizon coming down the pike somewhere. And the result of that is that periodically you get a new game that was a great addition to their collection. And in between, you're always getting really cool new expansions for the existing games. And they always added some of the games. The games got bigger, maybe a little unwieldy, but it was always made the games more fun. And that's who Flying Frog was, until now. In 2014, Flying Frogs did a Kickstarter campaign for Shadows of Brimstone. And in 2015, they just became the company that produces Shadows Over Brimstone. I think they put out one expansion for their Dark Gothic card game. Other than that, everything was Shadows of Brimstone. I haven't played Shadows of Brimstone yet, so I can't comment on it. I haven't played it mainly because I don't have time to put the minis together, and I can do a whole other video ranting just about that. But the fact is, they've really changed the way they do things this year. I know they're obligated to spend all that Kickstarter money, but maybe if it handcuffed you creatively and really put a damper on everything your company was previously, maybe Kickstarter wasn't the way to go. Now, who am I to talk? They're laughing all the way to the bank. I wouldn't be surprised if 2015 was the most successful year in the company's history because Shadows of Brimstone was so huge. But still, they really turned their back this year on a lot of what made their company great and what made them special. And because of that, I couldn't in good conscience put them at #1 on my list, which is where they would have been any other year. If I see a change in 2015, if they go back to doing what they were doing before, no doubt in 2016 they will be #1 on this list. But if they continue to just be the Shadows of Brimstone company, they're going to fade back on this list and eventually fall off altogether. But I'm optimistic. I'm hoping for great things from Flying Frog in 2016. Hoping to see them get their other games revved back up, new games. Just see all that great creativity that made this a great company and, for now, makes them #2. And finally, the #1 game publisher, Fantasy Flight. I almost hate to make that call because it seems like such an obvious frontrunner pick. But who else can you go with besides Fantasy Flight? I mean, let's look at it this way. Let's forget about everything else they publish besides Star Wars, Warhammer, and Arkham Horror. With just those 3 properties and everything they produce with those, we're still talking about one of the greatest publishers in the industry. I mean, with Warhammer, you have Chaos in the Old World, Disc Wars, Forbidden Stars, Space Hulk, Death Angel, Conquest. With Arkham, the Arkham series, you have Arkham Horror, Mansions of Madness, Elder Sign, and Eldritch Horror. With Star Wars, you have X-Wing, Imperial Assault, Armada, the Living Card Game, and you got Rebellion coming out next year. Don't like any of those games? What about all the Lord of the Rings games they publish? How about Game of Thrones and the series of Game of Thrones games they have? All the games in the Descent and Runebound universe. What about the Android series? No, not happy with any of those. Let's talk about their standalone games. Fury of Dracula, Twilight Imperium 3, Wiz War, Battlestar Galactica, Sid Meier's Civilization, Cosmic Encounter. It's Fantasy Flight, guys. Yeah, their games are big, heavy, expensive. The rules could be a little fiddly. There's a lot of dice chucking, a lot of luck, a lot of plastic. And if you hate those kind of games, you're probably cringing when I was reading off that list. But even if the games aren't up your alley, you have to admit that Fantasy Flight does what they do. They feel their niche better than anybody else in this industry. And they've been doing it consistently year in and year out for a long time. Is every one of their games great? No. But when they hit, man, do they hit. And they give you a great game experience that you're going to take with you for a long time. And that's why I couldn't think of anybody else to put at #1 besides Fantasy Flight. And they are my #1 game publisher. Alright, everybody, thanks so much for watching this edition of the Top 10 Top 10s of Board Gaming. Please be sure to leave me a comment. Tell me what you thought, what I got right, what I got wrong, and who your favorite board game publishers are. While you're at it, please be sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel, like us on Facebook, and follow us on Twitter. Links below in the description. After you've done all that, check out our sponsor website, alteregogames.net. As the holidays loom closer, you need those last-minute board game gifts. They're the site you want to go to. They're going to have great games at great prices. If you want to check out some of our older top 10 lists or other videos, find them on YouTube, Facebook, Board Game Geek, or the Alter Ego Game site. That's all I have for now, guys. I'll see you with list #6. Have fun out there.